Well, federal opposition leader Peter Dutton has urged the Victorian Liberal Party to get their act together following a number of recent scandals for the state opposition.
This is the thing. I mean, the focus should be on the Labor Party in Victoria, because when you speak to Victorians, they've had a gutful of Dan Andrews. And there is a huge whiff around the whole government down there. And I think there are lots of issues. And I think the Liberal Party need to get their act together down there and keep the pressure on the government.
Of course, the Victorian division does need to get its act together so that they are a strong and credible alternative to Labor.
And it comes after I broke the news a short time ago that a number of MPs gone to Parliament's independent offices for advice about behaviour they've experienced in the Parliament. Joining me now live here in our Melbourne studios, Victorian Opposition Leader John Pesutto. Mr Pesutto, really appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
Thanks for coming in. So I understand a number of MPs have gone to Parliament's independent offices, Department of Parliamentary Services, asking for advice on how to lodge a HR or a bullying complaint about alleged behaviour and culture within the Victorian Liberal Party, including behaviour that they allege may have been done by yourself or your leadership and others within the party. If you've got MPs going to Parliament's independent offices for advice, doesn't that just show that the Victorian Liberal Party and its processes can't be trusted by its own MPs?
What I'd say to that, Simon, is that I don't know who these MPs are. I saw reports yesterday, like all of us did. I don't know who they are. What you did see yesterday was a large number of MPs come out and say that they've only ever seen me act professionally and collaboratively. I've always done that. I've been in the party a long time. I respect its processes and I respect my colleagues. What I would say, if somebody feels that they need to make a complaint, by all means, they should make it and provide the details. I would encourage them to do so if that's the case. But I saw references in the media, and I think that's part of what you're alluding to, of the party room meeting earlier this week. Well, there were only 3 people who went anonymously to media, but against that...
You know that for sure, 3 people.
Well, I read that in the media. According to media reports, there were 3 who did that. But what I can say, on the other side, is that a large number of MPs from across the party room came out, put their names to their comments and said that they've only ever seen me work collaboratively and professionally, and that is how I operate.
But 3 MPs is 3 too many, isn't it? You'd want all your MPs to feel safe at work and able to raise any views. I mean, it's the Liberal Party that values free speech. Yeah,
it's hard to respond to something when you don't know what's being alleged and who's making it. But what I would say, Simon, is this is all part of, let's be candid about what's really going on here. I'm a new leader. And I'm aware that, excuse me, in order to win the next election, we've got to be a professional outfit that is united and disciplined, a disciplined campaign team that reflects the needs and priorities of the Victorian people.
You're clearly not at the moment, aren't you?
Well, I've been in the job 4 months and I'm conscious, Simon, that I need to help reform the party. I'm going to lead that process. I want to work with my colleagues and everybody who shares that. There's room in the Liberal Party for a diverse set of views. That's never been the issue. The issue is, are we going to be a professional outfit, a reformed outfit that can go on to win the 2026 election? I'm confident that we can do that and I'm determined to achieve that.
Did you renege on a deal or the agreement within the party room with Moira Deeming about her suspension?
The party room on the 27th of March made 3 principal conditions. And in my view, they've been all acquitted. There is a 9-month suspension. There was a statement that was jointly prepared.
So jointly prepared, not jointly given.
And let me explain.
This is the contention. This is the contention at the moment. And there are many MPs that have been telling me that their understanding was it was to be a joint statement. And there was even murmurings before your 1:15 news conference on that day that you'd stand up with Moira Deeming. Was that at all discussed?
That wasn't never going to happen.
Why?
No, that just wasn't going to happen. The outcome of the meeting was that there would be a statement jointly prepared, and it was. Every word that went out was wording approved by Moira Deeming, right? That's the... In terms
went out from your, to be clear, went out from your office.
Yeah, and that was part of the joint
with her name, right?
Yeah, that's what was meant by jointly prepared. The wording was jointly agreed, but she ultimately had to approve every word, and she did. Ultimately,
you've now got this dispute, though, where there's minutes that were taken of that specific outcome. And my understanding is that the minute taker in the room and a senior MP now want to meet with you and your deputy about this to try and get an agreed position. Now, has that meeting taken place at all or been scheduled?
No, these are now matters for the party room, and that's why I'm not involved.
Clearly
in
there's
specific
frustration
discussion.
out there if this hasn't taken place.
It's a small group. Understand what's going on here, Simon. This is actually a very small group that is trying to thwart efforts by not only myself, the overwhelming number of MPs who just want to be, one, an effective opposition, and two, the next government in Victoria. Now, we're determined to do that, but there is a small group that no matter what happens, they are going to be oppositional internally.
On this supposed, and they were quotes from Peter Dutton, whether it's a threat of federal intervention or at least the discussion of federal intervention into the Victorian Liberal Party. Now that brings up probably memories for many on Spring Street of recent years where there was intervention into the Labor Party. The fact that you've got your federal leader now floating that as a possibility and looking at options, are you prepared for federal intervention if that needs to be the circuit breaker here?
I don't believe federal intervention will occur, and I don't believe it's necessary. The reason I say that, Simon, is that my colleagues and I know that we've got to reform the party. And what we mean by reform is be an organisation that is grassroots, doing work in the community, building proper campaign systems with campaign teams and developing policies.
But do you know that too by speaking to Peter Dutton? Have you spoken to Peter Dutton since his comments on the Today Show and with Patricia Tarvellis this morning? I'm sure you've heard them.
Yes.
Have you picked up the phone to Peter and actually tried to clarify those comments at all?
No, but we'll speak soon. We get on perfectly fine at a personal level. I've got enormous personal reality. We'll do that. But I don't believe that will happen. I don't believe it's necessary. And I just reiterate again, Simon, I'm a new leader and I'm determined with my colleagues to reform the party to make it, one, an effective opposition, and two, the next government in Victoria, because we need it. Yeah. The government is corrupt, it's financially delinquent, wasting taxpayer dollars, and it's tired and exhausted. We need an effective opposition, and I can't do that unless the party is disciplined.
The government's out there effectively, so dancing on the, it's not the grave, but it's essentially dancing on the Liberal Party at the moment. I mean, I just want to play you what Steve Demopoulos, who was the Victorian government spokesperson, said this morning about this affair. Let's have a listen.
I do note that the opposition were going on about what is, for us, a sensible conversation over WorkSafe and WorkCover. But they're doing that all the while. Some members of their own party say they feel unsafe in that workplace, and you wonder whether maybe there's a referral that needs to be made to WorkSafe in relation to the Leader of the Opposition.
So Labor's there saying that there should be WorkCover complaints from some of your own MPs. How are you able to prosecute an argument against the government of Victoria with everything that's been revealed recently, the horror budget that's to come, the IBAC Daintree report recently? How are you able to prosecute that if you've got these issues in your party at the moment?
Well, I'm conscious of that, but we will continue to prosecute the government. The sad thing about Steve Demopoulos is I really like Steve. I think he's a really decent guy, but he's part of a corrupt government. And he sits around a cabinet table knowing that there is a government operating corruptly. And don't take my word for it, Simon. Right? Robert Redleek, the former IBAC commissioner, allegations of corruption inside the Andrews Labor government. The Ombudsman, Deborah Glass, made scathing comments about the Premier himself and his low regard for corruption and standards in his own government. We have the Premier himself. Let me just give our viewers a taste of the style of corruption under Daniel Andrews. Daniel Andrews had union representatives in his office prior to the 2018 election, and he asked them, "What do you want?" The unions told him they wanted some money, and he said, "You got it." That's corruption.
His staff, though, were
no, he was in, that was in his office.
His staff,
but he said
the
that.
The IBAC report says that his staff is properly influenced.
We know more than what the IBAC. Simon, we know more.
Sorry, the Liberal Party knows more than what IBAC has.
No, well, IBAC's report deals with the matters before it, but we've made our own inquiries, and we are aware that the Premier met with the union in his own private office in One Treasury Place, and he said to them, "What do you want?"
Have you referred this to IBAC?
Well, the report's already come in. But the point is, the IBAC report's now been made, and
but this is a new allegation.
Well, there was an allegation that, and it was addressed in the report that he did meet with them, but it didn't say what actually happened. They met in his office.
A couple of quick questions. Is your leadership safe?
Yes.
Does the Liberal Party support the sale or prescription of heroin? Because last night the Liberal Party in the injecting room debate, where a Melbourne injecting room was made permanent, supported an amendment which would have prescribed or had allowed the sale of heroin in the injecting room context.
No, that's not right. What we support is the regulated availability of hydromorphone treatment, which is the use of an opioid derivative. So what it means is it's a very controlled, regulated environment where you're helping people get off addiction. And this is where the difference between the Andrews government and us is. The Andrews government, wants to help people, but it will keep people on a cycle of dependency. What we want to do, which is different to what Andrews wants to do, is we want to break that cycle and get people into recovery so they're off substances altogether. And hydromorphone, using a heroin derivative, under very regulated circumstances, is one fairly reputed way of being able to treat people so we can break that cycle, not perpetuate it. That's the difference.
Still heroin derived though,
but we're getting people off. The idea is to get people off heroin. The idea that Labor was sprouting, that somehow it was deregulating and decriminalising, is just ridiculous. And look, the government is just spreading misinformation. We want to get people off their dependent substances. That's where the difference is. Labor wants to perpetuate the cycle. We want to break the cycle for people.
Well, you told me that your leadership's safe. I hope to have you back in the chair sometime soon. John Pesutto.
Anytime you like.
Appreciate your time. Thanks for coming in.